Everyone for joining. I'm going to be talking about the limits of conventional fire suppression to protect communities or forests. And in my opinion, we're in a little scary spot because we put a lot of our eggs in the basket of emergency fire suppression to protect communities or forests from these large wildland fires. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here's the great fantasy that, and I was ate up with it too when I was a 20-something wildland firefighter. There were these kind of eco warriors battling blazes, fighting fires in this war on wildfire. But this war is one that's it's just unwinnable. We're basically making war in nature, and a lot of the war metaphors are very misguided. In fact, they're misnomers. We really should be doing land stewardship, not making fire crews more stewards than soldiers. Next, please. The reality is that a 21st century climate is rapidly ending the effectiveness and efficacy of our 20th century firefighting strategies and tactics. I use this image a lot in my presentations. It's from a California news media TV station. It's almost like stock footage. Every year we have a fire emergency in California, and this was 25,000 acres total. Now, not a single wildfire at 25,000 acres barely registers in the news media, but in many cases, firefighters are running away from the face of flames. Next, please. So I think we need to distinguish between the period of attempted fire suppression and effective fire suppression. We've been fighting fires in organized manner for over 100 years. But back in the days when we used flame swatters and misery whips, not that effective. The photo on the right is a stage photo that in the early 1950s, they're throwing everything at it. At that point, the Forest Service started using war surplus equipment, supplies, and large crews, and they started logging and eroding the forest. And given the appearance that actually, we can stop and put out wildfires. Next, please. But the real story is that, and you saw this graph in Eric's presentation, is in the post-war period, there was a part of natural climate variability, a cooler, moister set of conditions for about 30 years that made mechanized fire suppression effective. At the end of that period, when, again, part of natural climate variability, we got warmer, drier conditions. Well, these were coupled with the growing effects of global warming and human-caused climate change. Now those conditions are over, and we're not as effective in stopping and putting out forest fires. Next, please. And this is forgotten history. This is a Smokey Bear poster from 1949. Well, in 1948, over 30 million acres burned across the U.S. So we haven't even come close to that yet, but it's soon coming. There's just so many sources of ignition. The vast majority are human-caused accidents, campers, smokers, car crashes, logging operations, and as we're finding out, power lines. Accidents happen. We can try to prevent them, but we can't prevent them all. And we have crazy arsonists at work, igniting fires in the worst times and places. And then there's lightning, particularly dry lightning and multiple strikes that cause these fire complexes. We just can't prevent all wildfires. That's kind of a moot issue here. Next, please. And nor can we stop all wildfires. Particularly in this age of climate change, these weather-driven wildfires, fire crews are not able to just anchor, flank, and hold like they used to in the last century. We're often backing off and burning out, waiting for a change in weather before we really attempt direct suppression actions. And the real paradox is that the aggressive firefighting is becoming much more dangerous to firefighters, much more expensive for taxpayers, much more damaging to the ecosystems we're ostensibly trying to protect, but less effective. And we've reached this point of diminishing returns the more resources, money, crews we put into fire suppression, the less we're getting out of it. We reached that decades ago, but it's still climbing. Next, please. Nevertheless, you know, we're still at it, using a lot of heavy metal, air takers, air retardant. But some Forest Service scientists have discovered we're using these air tankers in the times, places, conditions where they're just not effective. They make great film at 11, and they kind of carry the flag that, you know, firefighters are doing something out there. But we might as well be dropping dollar bills on the fire. They're just burning a lot of money, putting the pilots and crews at significant risk, but just not effective in stopping and putting out these fires. Next, please. And we're using a lot of big iron, particularly this summer, partly in concern for putting crews at risk from COVID. We put a lot of big iron at work, lots of bulldozers, particularly in the state of California. And these are very damaging to the ecosystem. They basically destroy soil. They cause permanent scars in the landscape, but fire and flames leap over them fairly easy in the conditions that are fueling these fires. Next, please. So what's happened is that these extreme fire events are driven by extreme or severe fire weather conditions, hot, dry, windy conditions. These are the most difficult, I'd say nearly impossible for fire crews to stop the fire to spread and put it out. Almost all of the disastrous urban fires happen during these red flag warnings. And the thing is, these used to be fairly rare, infrequent events. Now they're becoming much more frequent and much more prolonged due to climate change. Next, please. And what's happened is the real significant issue is that it's this rate of spread, incredible rate of spread. These fires are exploding in size, largely driven by embers. When you have hot, dry, windy conditions, it just takes one tiny ember to land on very dry fuels, and it starts a new fire. So these fires are just spreading at just exponential rate, driven more by these tiny embers, these blizzards of embers, not the tsunamis of flames. Next, please. And so they're hopscotching across the landscape, leapfrogging across fire lines and fuel breaks, really overwhelming, outpacing firefighters. These folks, you know, standing on the Washington shore of the Columbia River, marveling at the Eagle Creek fire on the Oregon side of the river, probably didn't know that there was another fire sparked by an ember, started uphill and behind them. So there's no fire crew that can improve upon the Columbia River. It has a fire containment line. Next, please. So I'm going to argue that wildfire has become the dominant specter of climate change in the Western U.S. Far more than melting glaciers or hurricanes, floods, rising seas. Wildfire is our dominant specter of climate change. Next, please. And this is the fantasy that every homeowner, in case of fire, will have fire engines and crews parked in their driveway, an air tanker swooping in their backyard, and it's just not going to happen. In fact, I almost wonder if this too is a stage photo, because this home is almost indefensible. It's located on a steep slope covered with very flammable brush. It's got those power lines in the backyard. It's just not going to happen. We don't have those kinds of resources, nor are they effective in these kinds of conditions. Next, please. Because reality is one single wildfire can threaten hundreds of homes simultaneously. And thousands of homes are destroyed by fire each year. The numbers continue to rise. And these images below really demonstrate that in many respects, the houses we've built, the houses we inhabit, are far more flammable than the surrounding forests. And these too are ignited by the tiniest little ember landing on a rooftop, or little surface fires, you know, marching across the lawn. And once you get one house ignited, it's like a domino effect of chain reaction of house-to-house ignitions. These become urban conflagrations. These are legitimate tragedies, disasters, catastrophes, where wildland firefighters have limited effectiveness. Next, please. So I want to challenge the frame that fires like these in Talent, Oregon, or Paradise, California, these are not really wildfires. They're certainly not forest fires. They're urban fires. Wildfires happen in wild lands. Forest fires happen in forests. But these are wildfires or forest fires that transition into urban fires. And the thing is, we can't fireproof forests. It's just we have to geoengineer the planet, but we can fireproof homes and communities. We know how to do that, and that should be our focus if our highest concern is saving lives and protecting property. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here's something from the National Climate Assessment that came out a few years, and I just want to demonstrate that, you know, what about those wildland fires in wildlands? Well, this graph shows that even in the largest fires, just a fraction of those areas really burn with high severity. They're measured by soil or tree mortality. Much of that area burns with relatively low or moderate severity. Fires in wildlands, fires in forests are typically regenerative and essential, vital natural processes. Very different from fires in urban areas. They're absolutely destructive, but avoidable. And so, next, please. So, this notion that preventing or suppressing all wildfires in wildlands will protect homes, communities, it's not happening now. It will likely not happen in the future given climate change. It's really a false solution. Real solution would be preparing communities for fire and hardening these homes and building the infrastructure for people to be, you know, safe in their communities. On the other hand, managing fire in wildlands with ecological principles and practices, that's really a hopeful solution. Well, that's the topic of another presentation. But the bottom line is, the sooner we prepare communities for fire, the sooner we can restore ecosystems with fire. But our necessary focus and priority should be concentrated on doing what we can in homes and communities to make the need for wildland firefighters maybe irrelevant. Next, please. And that's it. Thank you very much.